So on this issue with NDI, and to be clear, NDI was not working to send their own missions to observe elections, as they do in a lot of countries. They were working with two local Bahraini organizations that were involved with local monitoring elections in 2006, and that were seeking to work together, these two, to monitor the upcoming elections later this year. And yes, as I mentioned, a representative from NDI was not allowed to enter the country, was turned away at the airport, and explicitly told that the reason was she planned to meet with these groups, and that this violated a clause of the Political Associations Law from 2005, which forbids foreign assistance to associations that engage in political activity. Up until recently, this foreign assistance or assistance by foreign entities have been primarily interpreted to mean direct financial funding for such organizations. This trend is sort of alarming. There's been a few other instances as well of the government acting to prevent meetings between foreign representative organizations, NDI and others, from meeting with both individuals and organizations in Bahrain.
So if indeed, your assessment is that there's no danger to upsetting the political apple cart or the balance of power, then to what can you attribute the constraint, and is it a more recent constraint?
I think that my impression, or speculation, from talking to people in Bahrain and involved in work there, is that the government fears that the election season leading up to the election at the end of the year may draw attention to some issues that and heightened tensions, both to kind of Sunni Shia tensions, as well as issues of corruption, perceived corruption. There have been some various issues involving Gulf Airlines that have caused controversy in the past. And I think there's more of a concern that campaigning, if it's not sort of constrained or kept within certain boundaries, will bring things into the public discourse that the government would prefer not to see. I mentioned the recent arrest and dismissal of a government minister on corruption charges, but I should add on that the day after his arrest, there was a government ban placed on any media coverage. And so there's sort of that issue. There's sort of this tension between them wanting to address corruption issues directly and to improve their image, but at the same time not allow kind of public discussion of it. So I think that the heightening of constraints in the political scene ahead of the elections is more out of a concern that the elections will bring increased scrutiny and increased public discourse on some subject areas that the government prefer not to see.
Dr. Al-Ansari, can you shed some additional light about this particular circumstance, and also what is the likelihood of elections being held and when?
I think it's going to be in November, and I believe that the international organizations are allowed to come and monitor the elections. This is mentioned by the government officially, and I don't think there is a serious case regarding the NDI. But what happened that due to some, I don't know how to say it, but the relation between the NDI officials and the some of Bahraini activists were unacceptable from the perspective of the government. That's why they try to.
Can you tell us unacceptable in what respect?
The government, they think that some of those activists playing illegal rules, supporting the illegal demonstrations, or supporting the I don't know, the demonstrations which not officially approved, yes, by the government. That's why the government decides to review the relation with the NDI.
Just out of curiosity, the Public Freedom Society, is it an independent NGO?
Yes.
in that respect. And so do you have an opinion as to whether that kind of monitoring is appropriate?
We monitored the election in 2006 and 2002. And we faced a lot of problems in 2002, but things get better in 2006. And I'm not sure what will be the situation in 2010. Still, we are waiting to know our area. We try to sit with the officials in the government, but still the things not clear for us.
It's about democracy. At the end of the day, there is very little, I want to say no, but there's very little tolerance for independent activity, whether it's by associations, by the media, or whatever. The NDI story has a precedent. There was an NDI representative in Bahrain for a number of years after 2002. He was basically declared ineffective, not in these exact words, persona non grata. The office ended up being shut down. His visa was not renewed. And so that's why NDI in particular has had this relationship with somebody based in Dubai, in fact, and having to visit Bahrain on a periodic basis in order to do really simple, innocuous things like conducting an election monitoring workshop. The same week that NDI representative was denied entry, the Bahrain Human Rights Society, which is an approved, government-licensed human rights society, had applied, and you do have to apply just to do about anything in Bahrain, had applied for permission to hold a workshop, a capacity-building workshop on monitoring detention conditions. They were denied that permission by the Ministry of Social Development on the grounds that it somehow represented, it was a violation of the law on societies which prevents them from being involved in any kind of political activity. So these definitions about what's acceptable or not are extremely elastic and are applied in a very arbitrary way.
Thank you. And can we get to the question around religious freedom? You heard the testimony of Dr. Al-Ansari, and so I wonder if you share that view when it comes to religious freedom. I think Bahrain has a population of about 9%, roughly, Christian, and then another smaller percentage of other religious practices. And so is it your view that at least in this area there is a range of tolerance that meets some human rights standard?
My own view is that freedom of religion is not a serious problem in Bahrain, particularly as it involves the relationship between the Muslim communities and non-Muslim communities. It's just not a problem. I think the problem has to do with the relationship between the majority Shia and minority Sunni communities, and there the issue is not so much religious freedom, that is, permission to hold worship services, rituals, and so forth. That's not, it's manifest more in kind of social and economic discrimination, or at least that's the perception of many Shia in particular. So it's more a social discrimination issue that overlies with sort of the sectarian and the communal division in Bahraini society. It's not freedom of religion.
And then, of course, across on the political side, that's where that tension takes place.
Yeah, although there are Sunni political opposition parties as well. They're small. There has been, I'd say generally speaking, not very many occasions since 2002 when any of the political societies, even say amongst the Shia, never mind Shia and Sunni, have gotten together on much of anything. Sort of treated politics as a party or political society politics is played like a zero-sum game to some extent. But where they do come together, and recently on the issue of land expropriations and corruption, there's potential there, but I think that's where the government, as Stephen said, that's where the government is very concerned that there may be an airing of criticism that involves corruption at the very highest levels that they don't want to see.
And then, as to the elections, has the government actually officially declared a date by which elections will take place, or that's just a presumption, Dr. Al-Ansari?